Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Christiana Best, host and creator of the podcast Inside Out, Outside In. This podcast was developed for and by colleges and universities. It is guided by the themes of diversity, inclusion, and equity. The goal of the podcast is to educate, inform, build community, and inspire change while centering the voices and experiences of people of color. The contents of this podcast do not represent any college or university.
It's like, hurry, we're waiting for you.
Great, great. All right, so I think we can get started at this point because everyone is here. We do have some folks in the audience as well. But before we get started, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Saldana, Mr. McGraw, and Mr. Click. We really appreciate you being here. The prison population is a population that's often invisible to the rest of us unless we have someone personally incarcerated. And I really want to sort of bring light to that and help students, whether they're social workers or public health leaders, whoever they are, even teachers, to understand the prison population. And as Mr. McGraw talked earlier, sometimes why people are there is not related to so much what they do, but who they are. And so we also have to accept that and we have to talk about that. So I'm going to take, I also just want to recognize the people that are in the audience. We have a few folks. So if you
Mhm.
have any questions for our panelists and guests, I would ask you to put it in the chat. And I have two producers who are working the chat, Sneha Jara and Smita Daja. Sorry if I mess it up. All right, so welcome, gentlemen. My name is Christiana Best, and I am an assistant professor at the University of St. Joseph in West Hartford, Connecticut. And the podcast is Inside Out, Outside In. This is a podcast for and by colleges and universities, and it's framed by the theme of diversity, equity, and inclusion. All right, so my first question is, we're in the midst of a pandemic. It's nothing like we've seen before. How do you think COVID-19 has impacted the prison system and those incarcerated currently? And I would ask Mr. Saldana, followed by Mr. McGraw and Mr. Click to answer.
Well, the impact of the COVID-19 on the incarcerated population reflects the disparity of the impact on Black and Brown communities in our society. Of course, 95, not 95, 75% of the people in prison are Black or Brown. So we know that there's a racial disparity on the impact. And if 75% to 80% of the people incarcerated were white, we probably won't be having this discussion because they will have some type of an agenda for them. But just like they don't have, we're not a priority in our society when it comes to healthcare. We are definitely not a priority when it comes to healthcare in prisons. So I'm formerly incarcerated. I've left a lot of men in prison, a lot of men who I spent decades of my life with. We shared a special bond of brotherhood. So I'm in contact with quite a few of these men. And to put it bluntly, they have been living in terror for the last 10 months or so, especially the last 6 weeks, where the surge of COVID-19 had hit the New York State prison system very hard. In just the last month or so, 10 people have died. And more people have turned up positive than in the last 8 or 9 months, in just the last month. So that just goes to show you that they are actually living in terror of this virus because they know that if they get infected, the likelihood, especially the elder, the likelihood of them surviving is very slim.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Mr. McGraw?
Yeah, I appreciate what the brother Jose said. And, you know, when we look at it like in Connecticut, so what we have is the 75% is definitely right. We play around with the numbers a little bit because when we start to talk about our brown brothers and sisters, some of the our Latin people are can be skewed as white. So they don't really give you the correct number, but we say 64% just for the sake of argument, right? So 64% are black and brown. And people say to me sometimes, you know, even on a Zoom I was on earlier, well, that's not a lot of people. Well, when brown people make up only 14% of the population and 64% of the population in the prison system, and that's in Connecticut, that's also a national average. So we already see who's the impacted people. So, you know, I don't want to preach to the choir, but I want us to be clear about who we're exactly talking about. Right. And those of us, I myself also spent 10 years of my life in and out of the Department of Corrections on what I call the installment plan. So I was there for a few years, got out, went back, came back in and out. And, you know, nothing really changed. The menu's still the same: fish on Fridays, hot dogs on Tuesdays, and cheeseburgers on Saturdays. That doesn't change over the decades. It's still the same thing. So, and the other thing that doesn't change is the medical care system, right? You're almost like, you talk about second-class citizens. In prison, that would be a luxury to be a second-class citizen, right? Where you're lower than that. So the medical system is, you know, and I'm hoping that we get into some dialogue for individuals who have never spent time in prison to understand, like, you know, you have to drop a request. If you got COVID, you got a chest cold, you got to drop a request. I mean, it's traumatizing just to think about it. You got to write a request. By the time that gets to the person, and then they come, maybe call you for med call, you may be already dead. And then there's a $3 charge to that as well. So that system is already kind of screwed up. It's not like you could just go to the doctor, like, you know, you could go to the walk-in clinic. You don't have that luxury inside. So now with this pandemic going on, it's even more challenging for individuals to be seen because lockdowns are frequent. So now you're locked in a cell with somebody who also is sick. And, you know, so, you know, our people, our black and brown people are like, you know, terrified because they're waiting to die. You know, the way the air system, and I'll just jump in here and say the way the air system, it's recycled air, you know, and what happens is it's not will you get sick, it's when you'll get sick. And I'll stop there so we can keep the conversation going. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Mr. Click?
Yes, I mean, both Mr. Saldana and Mr. McGraw already summed it up in terms of the medical situation. The medical situation there in prison is definitely lacking. It's gross. It's disgusting. The brother mentioned, you know, putting in a request, and if your request gets heard, and then you go seek medical attention. But even then, that's a joke. I have a friend who's currently locked up in a Virginia correctional facility, and he himself was exposed to COVID. And he just said that the whole condition there was just a joke. Like they didn't take anything serious with him. You have people who are locked up in dorms. We also forgot about to mention that for the individuals who are within institutions who just have mainly dormitories. So if one person, two people get sick, and then it's likely that 60 people within that dorm, you know what I mean, will also contract the virus. And again, the whole medical, it's a joke. Going back to my friend, he said that it's like probably a few staff members that are there in medical, and they don't even really see anybody. So the whole condition relating to the pandemic is just worse than it's totally worse.
Wow. Yeah, well, thank you for giving us this sort of lay of the land in understanding the medical situation there. I don't know how insightful this question is, but I'm going to try to ask it as best I can. We know that the virus thrives in congregate settings. Do you feel that enough is being done for the incarcerated related to testing, taking precautionary and protective steps for prisoners as well as guards?
Anybody want to go? I'm ready. I'm ready anytime. I'm ready. Brother Charles, you want to head him first?
The testing, I mean, I can't even speak to that. I myself, I did 13 years. I came home in 2015. So fortunately for me, I didn't have to experience what's going on. I'm not in that much contact with people anymore who are incarcerated, because most of my individuals who came home, most of the people who were incarcerated with me, they're already home. So a lot of them pretty much like bypass that system of being trapped inside the system with this whole pandemic. But I can't really speak to how the testing procedures are being done there. I can only imagine that it's not being done how it's supposed to be done. You know, especially in there when, again, a healthcare system inside is terrible. They don't really care about Black and brown men or women inside. And I believe it was the brother, Mr. McGraw, who mentioned that people just there just waiting to die, period. You know, so especially the elders.
Mhm.
Right.
And let me really say, speak about, but this is a very serious matter, because 10 months after this pandemic hit the New York State prison system, PPE is still inadequate. But we'll start from the very beginning. RAP was founded by a collective of formerly incarcerated people. We are an organization that is predominantly composed of formerly incarcerated or people impacted by mass incarceration. We have family and friends and loved ones languishing in prisons, and some have languished in there for over 4 decades. So when this pandemic hit, just outside, we knew that it was only a matter of minutes before it hit the prison system. And we knew that some of the folks that I left behind were elderly, and we knew that they didn't stand a chance. So we started advocating for them immediately, because the governor paraded on national TV how he had prison labor produce hand sanitizers that the incarcerated men could not use. And that was just despicable.
Wow.
So we started advocating, we started advocating that not only they be allowed to use this hand sanitizer that was produced by slave labor in prison, but they should also have access to all the PPE that all of us out here have access to. That is highly recommended by the CD, all the experts, national and international experts, all recommended masks. This is just fundamental. And incarcerated people in New York State were actually disciplined for fastening masks out of handkerchiefs. So we had to fight for them to even get masks. And even today is inadequate. They expect them to get one of these disposable masks and last for a month, 3 weeks to a month. And they're washing them continuously. And I believe that the efficiency of the mask is lower by constant washing. So the PPE is still an issue 10, 11 months after the virus hit the New York State prison system. And being frank, PPE really has limited preventive validity, because in a prison setting, you cannot social distance. So we are demanding the governor that he decarcerate through his executive power of granting clemency. And we demand our lawmakers to initiate legislation that we've been pushing for years now, that would decarcerate and get the elder people out immediately. And we're talking about men and women by the hundreds who have already languished in prison for 3 or 4 decades, to get them out through our legislative initiative and through Governor Cuomo's executive clemency. That is the only humane solution for this crisis in a prison setting.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very important. And when you talk about the elderly, are you talking about incarcerated persons who are over the age of 65?
No, a person 65 years old, for the most part, there are always exceptions, but a person that's 65 years old is most of them are in RMUs, regional medical units, because they're closer to 80, 85 years old. Mm-hmm. Having languished in prison for 4 decades, the age process just accelerates at a greater rate than we do out high when we have better access to better medical care. Even though in society, we as Black and brown people have substandard health care, in prison is just super substandard. And just to show you, this numbers don't lie. I just want to give you just very brief numbers. And since Governor Cuomo took office, over 1,000 people have died in his prisons. 700 of those are people 50 and over. 750 and over. And the average age at death was 58 years old. That's the expected longevity for a Black and brown person languishing in prison for decades in New York State prison system. This is why, the social distance is mathematically impossible. And we say that the only way we can save lives is by decarcerating in New York State prison.
Thank you for that. Mr. McGraw, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just gonna, I really appreciate the conversation. What I was gonna say is like, where we talk about social distance and, it's impossible in congregate living situations, right? So the other thing is that when you're in prison and you're seeing the fact that you might need a respirator to live, we already know that there's no respirators coming to jail. So you already know that that's not an option. That's an unrealistic option. So what we have to do is, if you're incarcerated, you're thinking about the safest way that you can yourself stay safe, right? Now, many of these individuals, like the brothers have said, haven't even been out of prison in decades, right? So and they're not getting visits. So we already understand that the virus is coming in through staff, right? So we already understand that. So I believe that one of the questions was, are they doing enough? We could have really short-stopped this with staff, making sure that staff came in prepared to handle, to deal with this vulnerable population, because once they got inside the prison, it was going to spread rapid. It was going to make everybody vulnerable. The downside is that what we're hearing, because we're connected to the people that are on the inside, and what they're saying is that the staff is actually blaming them for getting people sick, which is almost impossible for individuals who have not been out to get people sick, right? So, it's almost like those of us that have been inside know that there's doors that everybody touches, meaning staff, right? When they're doing their counts and when they're walking in and out. And then we also know there's a certain subset of people who do not believe in wearing masks at all. They believe that this virus is a hoax. So if you're out here believing it's a hoax, and then you're going inside and you have the ability to infect people, especially people that you think are substandard or less than, you don't really care about them anyway. So therefore, before we could even get PPEs in Connecticut, the men and women were tasked with making the masks out of uniforms, and they were having the uniforms. And I believe that some of them are still wearing uniforms around their faces right now. And I would definitely be worried about our 55 and up population, right? Because the interesting thing is, and this is just for the individuals who have not been incarcerated, understanding in Connecticut, the old man block, what we call the old man block or the senior block, starts at 35, right? So you're considered an OG in your 30 at 35 and up. You're considered an OG in that unit. So you may be 35, 40, but you're going to be housed with possibly 60, 50, 60-year-old people. So in there, that environment is infested with all kinds of, not just the pandemic, not just that, there's all kinds of other things. And, as people get older, they struggle with other health issues and all this, and this is all in a one dorm. So, there's a lot to be concerned about when we're talking about brothers and sisters behind the wall and the advocacy piece. I just want to say one thing that the brother Jose said. We have a lot of advocates, what we call boots on the ground here, but they were advocating for release. Now, I'm an advocate and an activist, right? So yes, I want release, but I want release to adequate housing. We want to make sure that when we're asking for things, we're asking for the right things, not just release, because what we ended up doing is having a bunch of people out on the street who can't go home because they're parents are elderly or and then the fear of, oh, you just got out of jail, so we know that corona's in there, you can't come here. So we have to always make sure when we're asking for something, we're asking for the right things. We want release to adequate housing. want people to be able to quarantine. We want them to be, so when they do come back into the house, you feel free to let your loved one back in. But you're not going to let somebody in who just came from an environment that we already know the rates of corona is high inside. No one's inviting that person into their house. And then the shelters aren't taking people, and then the services are limited. So what we find is a structure. We put people in a situation where they may have to reoffend because that's the safest place for them, back inside.
Wow. Wow. Do you have a response to that, Mr. Saldana, in terms of the housing and preparation for when people are released?
Well, I have a response for quite a few things. So, but let me just first say, to make things, perfectly clear from our perspective, I'm the director of RAP, the Release Aging People in Prison campaign. We advocate for the elderly. We have bills that we organize and advocate so that the elderly people can get out of prison instead of dying in prison, like some of my mentors have died in prison. And I'll tell you, I spent 38 years in prison. So, and I tell people that the worst day out here is better than the best day inside. So and now, to deal with the housing issue with formerly incarcerated people, especially the elderly, that is a problem. That's a very serious problem in New York. But just look at the math. If we have 9,000 people 55 and over in New York State Prison, 9,000. So it costs us up to 200,000 to actually house, 200,000 a year to actually house one of these elderly people. Not all of them, but up to it, for anywhere from 120 to 200,000 just a year just to house an elderly person in prison. And you times that number by 9,000, or if you cut it in half by 4,500, and that 4,500 are people who have already languished in prison for decades. Just cut that in money. Look at the money that you would save, and that the money that can be used for reentry, not only reentry services, but services in our communities that are urgently needed. So the money speaks for itself. The solution is, we say the solution is always to decarcerate, because we can deal with housing people once they get out. And the false or the myth is that people who languish in prison have nowhere to go. That's not true. I did 38 years and I'm in a beautiful apartment with my wife. I have family support. Most of us do have family support. That should never be an excuse not to release somebody from prison or to have that person die in prison.
Right. So I want to just give some information about who you represent and who you are, which I should have done at the beginning, but forgot to, neglected to. So I'm going to start with Mr. Saldana. For those of us who are listening and participating in this podcast episode, Jose Hamaz Saldana is director of RAP, the Release Aging People in Prison campaign. RAP is a grassroots community organizing and advocacy campaign co-founded by the collective of formerly incarcerated people. RAP works to end mass incarceration and promote racial justice through the release of older people in prison and those serving long-term prison sentences as a means of uprooting greater forces of injustice that upholds the legacy of racism, revenge punishment, and the control of Black and other communities of color. Jose Saldana is formerly incarcerated. He was released from state prison in January 2018 after a total of 38 years of incarceration. So, Mr. Saldana, later on, I'm going to ask you to talk to us about your experience in prison, your lived experience. I'm sure a lot of people can benefit from that. Next is Charles Klink Jr., also known as Prince Shakur. Am I saying it correctly?
Yeah, Shakur, like Tupac.
Shakur, thank you. I got you. Was born and raised in Far Rockaway, Queens. He enrolled in New York College in 2016 as a full-time student majoring in social work. He has a special interest in justice reform and wants to work closely with at-risk youths. And he recently graduated from NYU, New York University, with a master's degree in social work. Congratulations. And next is Daryl McGraw, who holds state certifications as an addictions counselor, recovery support specialist, and a criminal justice professional. He holds a bachelor degree in human services and a master's degree in organizational management and leadership. As the former program director of the Yale University Department of Psychiatry, he was contacted to serve or contracted to serve as the director of the Office of Recovery Community Affairs for the State of Connecticut Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. Mr. McGraw is a community organizer, activist, and philanthropist. He serves on several boards involving reentry and criminal justice reform in the state of Connecticut. He consults with law enforcement, universities, policymakers, behavioral health and addiction treatment facilities who are looking to expand their knowledge and expertise in the area of criminal justice reform. Welcome, Mr. McGraw. So this is a really good conversation. I want to keep the momentum going. So what I'm hearing you say is that the basic protective and precautionary steps that are needed to help the prisoners and even maybe the guards are not in place in the prison system, at least not in New York and certainly not in Connecticut. And the medical system is poor, to say, yeah. All right, so I have a question for Jose. Jose, as a formerly incarcerated person, what was your lived experience and what was most challenging for you? And can you also talk about what helped, what was beneficial for you when you were released from prison?
Well, during most of my years of incarceration, I was an activist. And as an activist, you know, I had confrontations with the administration. So that's just part of what I chose to do. And I lived with that. And over the years, as I was getting closer to my parole board, I was started doing some advocacy dealings with parole reform. So, because I knew that we're talking about a period at the height of mass incarceration when the release rate in New York State was less than 5%. Less than 5% appearing before. We talk about 12,000 people appearing before the parole board every year, and less than 5% were being released. So that was a problem. It was a personal problem for me, and it was a collective problem for all those who were incarcerated that would be appearing before these parole boards. So we started challenging the parole board, but we didn't have too much success. In fact, we had very little success. It wasn't until the 2012 or so that this group, we know now as RAP, this collective got together and started addressing these issues that we were addressing inside for years. And the first thing RAP did was challenge or had the regulations that govern the parole decision-making process, had them modified. But the modifications didn't mean nothing. The parole board had a lot of power. They were independent then. They're now part of the New York State Department of Corrections, but then they were independent. And they actually played God with people's lives. And they didn't want that power that they had, you know, took from them. So deregulation didn't mean nothing to them. And then RAP did something that was extraordinary. They compiled evidence against the most punitive-minded commissioners. And we're talking about a parole board that's dominated by law enforcement commissioners, retired cop, retired DA, retired police officer, detectives in New York. All of them now, when they retire, now they want to be commissioners and make $120,000 a year and deny people parole. So RAP exposed them for their bigotry and racist remarks during hearings, actual testimony during parole hearings, and presented this evidence to the governor. And when the governor seen this, you know, it was so outright that he didn't reappoint them as they customarily do. They have 6-year terms, and they reappointed for a lifetime. So he didn't reappoint them. Instead, he appointed 6 new commissioners from a diversified background. That's all we was asking for inside. Give us someone that can give us a fair hearing, not an ex-cop. So one of these newly appointed commissioners was the commissioner that I went before at my 5th parole board hearing. She had a social service background. And as opposed to other interviews where that's all they want to know is the crime I committed in 1979. She asked me one question about this crime, and then she said, now let's talk about what you've been doing the last 38 years. And based upon what I've been doing the last 38 years, she decided, contrary to everybody else, that I did not pose a risk to public safety and released me. So RAP made it possible for me to get released. And in just a 3 or 4 year span, RAP actually was not only RAP, but Parole Prep and other grassroots community organizations that were working with RAP, they actually increased that release rate to this today in the 40s. Now that's not good enough for us. We want it to be a lot closer to 100% because people should not be judged by who they were decades ago. So this is how I became affiliated with RAP, because they were instrumental in releasing me. So naturally, after I came home, I reported to RAP for duty.
Great, great. Thank you. And you also had your family waiting for you, it sounds like.
Exactly.
Great, thank you. Mr. McGraw, anything similar in Connecticut like RAP that you're aware of?
No, and I was going to make that point that New York has been very progressive in different areas where we don't have an organization exactly like RAP. I started an organization in 2017 called Formerly Inc., and our focus is really about reentry and getting individuals out and keeping them out, right? So a lot of times what we've experienced in Connecticut is Connecticut does very well at locking people up, but what they don't do is transitioning them out, right? So people can go to jail. We have this thing what we call, and I know in New York, for my brief time I spent in New York facilities, is that there's this thing called an AP room. So that's admitting and processing, right? So when you go there, you get your uniform, you get your ID, you get all of this stuff, and they give you a rule book. And they teach every jail you go to, they teach you about the jail and the system, right? But when you get released, whether it be 10 years, 5 years, 2 days, whatever, they don't give you a rule book on how to transition back into the community. They don't teach you how to live back in the community. So our goal, well, for me, I created a 5-year plan while I was incarcerated, and that was my roadmap to transition. So then I realized that, a lot of the things that I ended up having to do, I knew it wasn't there for other people. So when I got out, I created an organization that now creates roadmaps for other individuals. We try to connect with them. We would love to connect with people 6 months to a year before release. That's our goal. That's what we're advocating, because we know that transition, actually reentry, begins at the beginning of the sentence, not the end, like the Department of Corrections would like us to believe. We would like to make the connection as soon as possible so we can transition individuals back. So that's the goal. So we do have some, I'm looking forward to talking to Jose in reference to expanding in our efforts, because this is not a me thing. This is a we thing. This is a countrywide issue. So the things that we do well in Connecticut, we will continue to do, but anything that New York can help us with, we were more than happy to implement that and try to advocate, because we do, in a small section, there are a couple of lawyers who are currently advocating for individuals with health issues, right? So they're trying to get these individuals released under the issue of, like, if you have like you got to be terminally ill to basically get out, right? And so one of the things we see that, but we've been partnering with lawyers and things to do that, but not where we're focusing on as RAP does. I'd like to learn more about it. And there's pockets and silos of small organizations, but we're completely independent. We are run by myself, formerly incarcerated people, Black and brown people. We don't take orders from anybody. We control this ship. And that's what it is. So we don't want to be at the table. We built our own table.
Right. Thank you for that. And we have a comment in the chat that says reentry transition improvement is needed everywhere, not only Connecticut. So I think everyone can agree with that. Thank you, Anthony, for that. So, Mr. Klink, I have a question for you. You're currently a social worker, and my understanding is that you also work with the incarcerated after they have been released. If not, just share with us your experience in your lived experience in prison, and also your work as a social worker with that population. I'm more interested in understanding the role of social work outside of being a clinician. What are some other roles that are present?
Social work is, to be a social worker is very vast. So when I was an undergrad, I just thought, when I grew up, social worker to me was just a person who goes inside the home, take away the children, and that was a social worker. But when I studied at York College, I realized that social worker encompasses a much larger scale, work in the court system, advocate for individuals who are detained. You have clinical social workers, you have hospital social workers, school social workers. So it's just um, a vast system as far as social work is concerned. For me, I am actually what is called an MST therapist, still a social worker, but I'm an MST therapist. And what that means is MST stands for multi-systemic therapy. And I work with different systems, the school system, the families, ACS, and I work primarily with families who have youth who have pretty much like referral behaviors. And these behaviors can be anywhere from drug use to runaways, to abusive behaviors, violent behaviors. And I just pretty much go in there, meet with the family, construct and create goals around those referral behaviors. I work closely with the families from anywhere between 6 to 9 months. And yeah, that's what I do, and my passion came for helping the youth because, again, myself, I was incarcerated for 13 years. And I just, there's always the saying that if you can go back and write a letter to your teenage self, what would you say? And I just basically wanted to help those who was heading down the same path that I was on. As far as my lived experience in prison, I'm familiar with rap. I was locked up in New York State. So with Jose, what Jose was saying, I'm familiar with the whole entire process, especially the commissioners. Unfortunately for me, fortunately, I didn't have that, parole. I had like a set date. I had a flat 15-year bid. So I was able to, as the saying goes, see light at the end of the tunnel, but that never negated the fact of my circumstances and the individuals with whom I was around. Individuals had 70 numbers, 60 numbers, and I learned a lot from them. And just looking at what Jose mentioned about individuals going to the parole board 4, 5, 6 times and being denied just solely on the basis of their crime. It didn't matter everything positive that the individual was doing while inside prison, but just because of the criminal record, just that person got denied and had to be sent back in front of the board for 2 more years. My experience in prison was quite different. I actually had gotten a associate degree from Bard College while I was in there, liberal arts. And then from there, it was all about education, self-education, going to self-help classes, understanding finances, credit, debt, just pretty much making a better me. So that was like my focus. Once I went in, like the brother Daryl mentioned, his process, AP. I'm not familiar with AP, but we call it the intake. That's where you basically got all your uniforms, the rule book, and everything. But my process, once I went in, I was already thinking about coming out. And that's what the education system, while inside, taught me. So that was my experience.
Right. Well, thank you for that. And I heard that um, the new package that was signed by Congress most recently is reinstating the educational part for people in prison, because that was taken away 20 years ago, right?
That,
So that's, I'm
right.
sorry.
No, and I was just going to say, yes, that was taken away during Governor Pataki. When he
Mhm.
took office, he basically stripped that away from, the inmates in prison. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I was speaking with Smitha during undergrad, myself and a bunch of other colleagues. We used to go to something that was called Lobby Day, where we would go to Albany, speak with the legislators, and we advocated on behalf of reinstituting that educational piece back into the system. And just showing the numbers, like Mr. Saldina mentioned, like it's all about numbers. You'll save so much money by basically reinstituting education within the system, because once an individual who is now educated learns more, come out and can be a productive productive person in society, and won't have to go back, recidivate. So
Right.
yes.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. So, gentlemen, as advocates for the incarcerated, what is the most important thing that we can that you can tell us about the prison population or the prison system to help with humanizing the people that are incarcerated? Because I do think that there is a disconnect. People become fearful if you've been incarcerated, and there's a lot of myths and information that gets circulate that distances, those of us who are outside from those who are inside, unless of course you're a family member. So what is it that you can share that would help with that connection?
Yes, and I was getting ready to say a man who was my first mentor. He when I met him, he had already been in prison for close to 15 years. And this guy here was a scholar. He came in, he didn't even have a GED when he first came to prison.
Mm.
He acquired multiple college degrees. He became an Islamic scholar. My mentor and a mentor to literally thousands of people throughout the decades of incarceration. And he was repeatedly denied parole. When he appeared before his 14th parole board, 14th, he had been in prison for 48 years. This happened in August last year.
Wow.
48 years, and before his 14th parole board. And during the board, he asked if he can go to the bathroom, and he never returned. He had a massive stroke in the bathroom and died on a prison bathroom floor.
Wow.
So I mentioned that story to show that a man who was a scholar, a mentor, a teacher, to literally thousands of men, and some of us out here now, and doing the same work that he would want us to do. Really carrying on his legacy. And he's not alone, but this is the type, you have these type of people in prison who have not only transformed their lives, but helped people all around them transform their lives. And the questions that this brings up is this justice? Is this what justice is supposed to mean? And obviously we say that justice should value human transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Justice should not be defined perpetual punishment and permanent punishment. And the thing is that obviously if this guy was white, they'd have made a movie about him. They'd have celebrated him. They'd have gave him a hero's welcome. But because he was a black man, he died in the prison bathroom floor. So I think the public, most people in our community are aware of it, but some aren't, that we are not what they portray us to be in the media, in the movies, as monsters, cold-blooded killers, And even if we were that at one time, that doesn't mean that decades later, this is who we're going to remain.
Right.
And I think people should know that human beings can and do transform their lives to the point, like myself and others like me, not only are we activists, I am also civically involved in my community. I'm a board member of a church that has a project that caters to the needs of children with incarcerated parents. And we are credible messengers once we are released, because we go to the worst communities of our city and reach at-risk kids and offer them a vision of a different future that does not involve gang violence, crime, and violence. So we have value. That's what I want people. We have value, and if Black Lives Matter in society, then we say that incarcerated Black lives also matter.
Great. Thank you for that. I do want to say, as we move forward, if you have a contact information that you would like us to share on our website or in the chat, you can also do that, and you can certainly let us know. All right. So Charles, I'm coming to you.
Um, the brother Jose like pretty much said it all. And I'm sorry to hear about your mentor. Definitely,
Yes,
that's like
we're sorry for his loss.
that's
Yeah.
definitely the norm. Being hit so many times at the board. One way to humanize prisoners, right, is by not. Let me just back up real quickly. Not just going by what's on paper. So let me just share a story. When I first got to downstate, downstate is the processing for New York State, right? Going to the state facilities. And I spoke with a counselor, and she just saw me based on what was on the computer screen, all the details that was given for my arrest and everything else. And she judged me based off of that. And make a long story short, because in the information I had admitted that I smoked marijuana. So she took it upon herself to say that I needed a drug treatment program. And I told her that I did not. And basically, I advocated for myself. And in the end, I did not have to do the treatment, right? But I say it to say as far as not humanizing people based on what's on paper. So I work with children, I work with families. We're referred by ACS. So when I get the reports by ACS, just because of what I see, because of that experience that I had in prison, I do not bring that to my work. So although it's in black and white what these individuals did, their family history, I do not judge them based on that. So I in sense humanize them. I get to know them, sit down, have a talk, and then that's how I move forward with them. But to answer your question, pretty much by not watching what's on TV. The television always has this myth about what prisoners are and what they are doing inside, and they are just evil, they this, that, and the other, and that is not the case whatsoever. So as far as just humanizing, just recognizing that people make mistakes, right? Just because an individual has been convicted of a crime doesn't necessarily mean that he or she did it. Case in point, the exonerated five. You saw the whole, for those who are old enough to remember, that whole publicity around the exonerated five, and they were already guilty without anything, and then come to find out, because again, they just didn't understand the facts and looked at them a different way. So to answer your question again, just not believing what the TV is saying, recognizing that we are all humans. Humans are infallible. We make mistakes, right? And just understand that a person's crime is not who he or she is, what that person was, like the brother Jose mentioned. So that's my piece on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Daryl?
So yeah, I agree with pretty much what everybody said, except for the one of the things that I would like to just add is the fact that when we look at other countries, we look at Germany, Norway, and these other countries, especially like Norway, right? So in America, punishment, and the brothers that have been incarcerated can attest to, it doesn't stop once you get sentenced. That's the punishment, is the taking away of freedom in these other countries. In our country, the punishment is long, it's ongoing. When you get inside, you got COs who believe that they're hired to punish you more. The punishment is the taking away of freedom, but people that work inside these facilities tend to treat you like animals, treat you inhumane, right? Instead of trying to rehabilitate, they go in with a purpose to treat you less than, right? But when you talk to these other countries, when you look at these other countries, Norway, Germany, and other countries, they look at the taking away of freedom as the punishment. Everything else is all about rehabilitation. They do auto works, college. They really prepare people for the return back into the community. And the only difference that we really see between Norway, Germany, and these other countries is color, right? Because in our country, we identify people as black and white, right? So they're treated with a lesser or lower standard. But when you talk about Norway, you're talking about Norwegians. So of course they're going to look out for their countrymen. They want these people to come back to their country or back to their communities a different way, and they look at them like they made a mistake. So we have this system of injustice, and we already know that our system is built off of systemic racism and how it was designed. So it's constant punishment. It's constant punishment. Even after you're released, there's still punishment. Like, you could have a life sentence. That criminal record, no matter how many letters I get behind my name, I still get people saying, oh, well, your criminal record. I'm like, I spoke all over the country. I've been out of the country doing presentations, yet my criminal record is still an issue. But when I speak inside and I talk to brothers and sisters on the inside, I make no mistake that this criminal record is still an issue, right? Because if I were to get arrested tomorrow, they don't care how many babies I saved, they don't care how many presentations I've done, the criminal record will be brought back up as if I got arrested, as if I had been committing crimes all along. And so we have to figure out when is a person's sentence over? You know what I mean? And when are we going to invest in true rehabilitation and treating individuals as human beings, right? And that's it. We haven't gotten there yet. Our system is not designed that way. And so we struggle. That's an area that we struggle in. But one of the things that I would just add is that 90% of the people are in there for nonviolent crimes. So you got a bunch of people in there that hasn't killed anyone, right? Majority of these people, the majority of people that are incarcerated have done nonviolent offenses. They're in there for substance use disorders and mental health challenges, and so on and so forth. So therefore, they're inside and they're being treated, like I just said, less than human for some of the things not even in their control. They can't even do the things they don't have any control over. Anyway, so it just only exacerbates the problem.
And to add on, I would like to add on to what Darryl said. Like, even in death, a person is dehumanized by bringing up their criminal record. You know how many times individuals have gotten shot and murdered by police, and then the first thing, the criminal record, the person was this, that, and the other. And it just always plays into that narrative that it goes with, it's attached to Black people. For instance, with the whole George Floyd incident, brought up his situation, but yet what just happened with the whole Capitol Hill debacle, when the one white lady had got shot and killed, what did the media bring up? Her Air Force veteran status, just a positive, but left out the other things that she was involved in as far as domestic stuff and whatnot. But again, dehumanizing, especially people Black and brown,
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. It's a constant battle uphill, it sounds like, to to remove this dehumanization that has occurred. Let's talk about, there seems to be, and I don't know the facts here, but there seems to be some effort about preventing recidivism and reentry. I don't know to what extent each, New York and Connecticut has made a real committed effort to help with that. But what can you tell me about these two different states, ability or resources that are available to reduce recidivism? I'll start with Mr. Saldana.
Let me first mention something that not too many people may really know. There's only one program in New York State prison system that we can say is rehabilitative, because that helps reduce the recidivist rate, and that's college. Higher education, all the research points that higher education reduces recidivism. The higher the education, the lower the recidivist rate is. But yet, This is the one program that's rehabilitated and it's not available to anyone. I spent 38 years in prison, and all I got was an associate's degree because I could not be transferred to a facility that offers a 4-year program. My security level would not allow me to be transferred there. So, you know, and really, when you look at it, less than 1% of people were actually graduating from college, and they took that away. Now they brought it back, and there's even less people that have access to it. And another thing is that no other program is rehabilitative in nature. The New York State Department of Correction does not offer a single therapeutic program that will help us, those incarcerated, those convicted of violent crime, because those are the people I'm speaking about, the ones that have been convicted of violent crime. Not a single program to help us take full responsibility for the harm that we did and develop insight into the harm that we did. Not a single program. So how do we come out as civic-minded, social conscious citizens? Because we develop these programs to help us. We developed this program to address our own shortcomings, to help us develop into better human beings. We are the ones that do this. And we are the ones that are actually, men like my mentor and other mentors that have passed away, they are responsible for reducing the recidivist rate in New York State prisons.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you for that. Charles, did you want to add?
Sure, I'll add on to that. He was right about having less access to higher education in prison. When I had the opportunity to get my associate's degree from Bard College, which is known as BPI, Bard Prison Initiative, I was in Eastern Correctional Facility at that time. This was back in 2009. And of the, I think it was 2,000 plus prisoners inside that facility, that exam to get into the program only came once a year. And for those who took it, about, I want to say 100 plus so made it as far as to the interview process. No, 100 plus people were able to take the exam, right? And then out of the 100 and so, half of that, like 50 or so individuals would get chosen for the interview process. And then out of the interview process, only about like 10 to 12 people would actually make it inside the program. So again, just having that low level or low access to the education was definitely a problem. But like the brother Jose mentioned, like higher education, of course, reduces the chances of coming right back into prison. He did also mention, I want to add on to the programs. Yes, the correctional institution has these things called transition, right? Phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, where these are the certain phases that will help transition the person from prison out of prison. And phase 3 is like when you're getting 90 days or less to come home. And even those transitional programs for me were definitely a joke because there was nothing really taken seriously. The individuals who were facilitating it were staff of the system, and they really had no knowledge as far as like what to do actually to help individuals come out. But there were programs that were instituted by prisoners themselves. I was in numerous programs called critical analysis that was headed by prisoners. The Exodus program that individuals from the outside came in, and we would sit down inside a big old classroom and just talk about politics, talks about a whole lot of different things. So these are the programs that I gravitated towards that were basically prisoner led, and it helped me, so yeah, that's the only real programs that can help as far as those that are pretty much prison led, and it's led for the right purpose of staying out and being great when the person does go out.
What's an example? What would you say that you learned from some of those programs that really resonated for you? Because I think it varies for different people. What would you say was the aha moment for you that said, yeah, this is something I could hold on to help me? And if you want me to come back to you, I can do that.
I wouldn't even, the aha moment, to be honest with you, that started with me while I was still on Rikers Island. And I remember to this day, I'm a veteran, right? I served in the U.S. Navy. And when I came home, I was still young and dumb and was hanging out in the streets, playing around with my friends, whatever the case may be. Got caught up in trouble. And I used to reach out to a fellow shipmate of mine who was still in Italy, and she and I used to be in heavy communication. And she pretty much, like, one day, I remember it was August of 2003. I went down to get a package, and inside that big old box was a dictionary, the Apocrypha, this one book, oh my goodness, From Niggas to Gods, right? Volume one. A whole bunch of materials about the prison industrial program, the Black Panther Party. So, like, that pretty much was my moment, based on that good friend of mine delivering these goods to me, having me open up my mind, and, like, that was my moment. And it started on Rikers Island. From there, that's where the process happened. Although I took my case to trial, a blue trial, I was determined to get out. So every 3 days, while I was in Clinton Correctional Facility, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, like clockwork, I would be in that law library trying to get out. So again, my process started early while I was still on Rikers Island, with all of that information that my good friend of mine gave me, and I learned a lot. So that was my aha moment, and it just started from there, and then that's it. Provided me to where I'm at right now.
Great. Thank you. All right, Mr. McGraw, Daryl. Okay.
Same question. Aha moment.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love that question. So I think that there's a lot to be said, but for me, I always go back to West Wing 25 cell in Hartford Correctional Center, and it was a single cell, and I had just got arrested. I was on a $250,000 bond, and I had just been tased by the police, choked by the police, all for driving while black, right? But the interesting thing, as I was in this cell and somebody came by my cell and they said, "Hey man, I got a book for you to read." And I was like, man, if I was reading books, I wouldn't be in jail, right? He's like, "Nah, I want you to read this book." He slipped the book under my door, and the book was The Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren. And it was a 40-day spiritual journey. I'm not sure if anybody's ever read it, but it is 40 days, 40 chapters. You're supposed to read each chapter per day, right? So my court date was 41 days away. So, I thought God was a bondsman. So I'm thinking God sent me this book. This was a spiritual, like, moment that, 40 days, 40 had to be this. This had to be from God. So I started writing, following the instructions. And, but by day 26, I started writing. I couldn't stop writing. And I started writing this plan about what I wanted my life to be, who I wanted to be. And through that process, through that 40-day process, I have found purpose in that cell, West Wing 25 cell. See, I have found purpose. And once I found purpose, my life, my vision was completely different, because I have been driving and walking around this planet without purpose, without a vision. And man, I have to be very grateful. On that 41st day, I went to court and I got 4 years. So I was like, God, I want to go home, but if that's not your will, then do with me what you will. And man, he sent me into the prison, and I started perfecting my craft, meeting brothers and mentoring. I started mentoring brothers from day one, and I created that 5-year plan, and I created many different things. One of the brothers here, Rob, who is on the call right now, and is who I look as one of my mentors as well, because when I got out, I was able to create a house that we call Friendship House for individuals who were getting released from prison. And my mentor, along with my mentor Chuck, who passed away last year in January, was really not only a spiritual mentor but a big brother, and really, he had a way with words. And we found a way, because it didn't exist. We found a way to create a space for individuals to return back into the community and really try to get their life back on track through mentoring, through actually just being there and mentoring those individuals. And I'll just close with, I agree with the brother Jose 100%, because while I was in prison, and when I wrote that 5-year plan and I was writing my process, I wrote that education was going to be the key. in education, I would not be sitting here if it wasn't for education. I don't think we can say enough about education because that is a level playing field. You know, I could say a lot of really cool stuff, but once I put those letters behind my name, for some reason, the people, even though I might have had this knowledge, it's different when you say it with these letters. For certain people, it's different. The brothers in the street don't care about the letters, but other people where the money's at tend to care about the letters. So, you know, that aha moment, man, was in that cell by myself and having wrote that 40-day spiritual journey, which eventually turned into a roadmap, which put me into a lot of really cool spaces. And I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had, and I'm looking forward to what's next.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Mrs. Saldana, do you want to share an aha moment? I know you had mentors and you have mentored others, but was there an aha moment for you?
Yes, in the late 80s, in New York State prison system, there were two pioneers, Eddie Ellis, a great man, and Larry White. They developed what they call the non-traditional approach to criminal and social justice. And I went to one of their class. I went to Larry White's class. I'm already looking. I'm looking for truth. I'm looking for some solutions to the predicaments that I inherited at birth. So I'm curious about everything because I'm saying that we should have the power to overcome the obstacles that were put before us. So I went to this class and he told us, it was a group of about, I would say a good 35 men in the classroom. And he said that no one owes us anything. Start off with that no one owes you anything, but you owe yourself something. And this is what you owe yourself. He said, if you follow these 3 golden rules, you will achieve something that other men will never achieve in prison. He said, and these 3 golden rules apply to everybody in prison. He said, the first rule is to get out of prison as soon as possible. What that means is that don't do anything or shun activity that'll keep you in prison longer. Everything has to be about getting out of prison. And the second rule is to get out a better human being than when you came in. And the third is to help someone else follow these 3 rules.
Wow.
And that became the foundation to everything I've ever done during them years of incarceration.
Wow. Those are great principles, I would say, right?
Very simple.
Yeah, yeah. To the point, really important. As we wind down, well, I have a couple questions left. One is, if there was, what would you say is the most significant policy that policymakers can enact to support and help people who are incarcerated? What would you say, given your work, would be the most important one? And you may all 3 have the same or 3 different ones. So I'll start with Daryl first.
Yeah, so I really appreciate this question. And the question would be, for me, I think it's really simple and direct. What we have, I don't know, at least definitely in Connecticut, the funding and the reentry process is under the Department of Corrections, right? Parole. So reentry should never be in the hands of the captor, right? And the money goes to, all the reentry dollars go to DOC and probation. The community should have that money. And the more and more people that we help stay out, there should be justice reinvestment. So those dollars should be reinvested back into our communities, back into programs to help people stay out. So the reentry is a very small piece of the budget, whereas corrections and treatment and all these other budgets are large. We need to be advocating for our own budget for reentry, and that money should be strictly divided amongst community organizations that are doing the work, not people who have really good grant writers, but individuals that are really doing the work, and must have lived experience on their board of directors. They must have people of color who have been through the system, who understand the system, and being a part of that process. other than that, we're just going to keep seeing the same thing, that the money is a joke. When we talk about reentry, it's really a joke to the rest of the community, because there is no reentry process. A few of us escape and buy our freedom, but the masses continue to be herded back in and out. And so I believe that we are on a modern day Underground Railroad, me, you, these brothers here, and it's our job, it's our duty to go in and save as many people as we can and keep bringing them out and showing them that this freedom is sweet and keeping them out here. We have to figure out a way from the legislative piece to get those funds shifted to the community, because that's where we're lacking. We do not have the resources to battle a system like the correctional system that exists right now.
Thank you for that. Mr. Saldana?
We advocate for 2 legislative bills, and one is an administrative remedy. The 2 legislative bills are, first, the elder parole bill, which provides that if a person has reached 55 years old and has served 15 years, he or she would be entitled to a parole interview to determine whether they are suitable to return back to their family and home community. The uniqueness of this bill is that it does not exclude anybody based on the crime of conviction or the length of sentence. And the reason why we don't exclude anybody, because we are founded on the principles that were established during the era of resistance to social and racial injustice. You know, some of our founders were involved in the leftist groups of the 60s and 70s. I myself was a member of the Young Laws Party. So we value the principles that were left to us from those who came before us. And we say that Black people in particular, brown people also, have been excluded from, throughout history, have been excluded from everything that's great in America. They've even tried to exclude us from the human race. So we cannot turn around and exclude anybody from justice. This is why we don't exclude anybody based on the crime of conviction. And the length of sentences is 15 years. We are part of a national movement that tries to cap life sentences at 15 years, because punishment should not define justice. Punishment should never define justice, because it only defines justice when it comes to us. That people can completely and totally transform their lives and seek redemption within 15 years and become outstanding members of their community. The second bill is the Fair and Timely Parole Bill, which prohibits the New York State Parole Board from perpetually denying parole for years and decades, based on the one thing no one can ever change, that the parole board will have to evaluate suitability on who the person is that's appearing before them. My mentor would not have died on the bathroom floor had this bill been passed by our legislators. And the third initiative is administrators. We call for the New York State Parole Board to be fully staffed. The law provides for 19 commissioners. We say it should be fully staffed with 19 commissioners, all who believe in human transformation and redemption.
Wow. Thank you for that. Wow. Yes. Charles.
I mean, those are definitely powerful from both Jose and Daryl. For me personally, it's a personal thing. Education, like reinstituting high education within that prison system. I'm a prime example of what education can do. I know a lot of people who went through the program I went through, very intense, and they came home, and a lot of them are successful, right? According to the numbers, Barr did a study. I think they said that everyone who went through their program, I think only like less than 2% came back to prison out of massive amount of people who came home. So that right there tells folks the significance and the importance of education in the prison system. Yes, reinstitute, bring back the prison system. And I get it. A lot of pushback is that, oh, why should this individual get a $50-something thousand education when my son or my daughter is paying? I have to pay. We get all of that, but once an individual is now a better man, better woman coming back into the community. And like the third principle of Jose mentioned, about helping that next person not fall into the trap. It's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for that person, for the community, for the next person. It's just a win. But the state that we live in, the country that we live in, they don't see it that way. So again, a lot of these politicians need to really reconsider about going back and implementing education inside the prison system.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. This has been extraordinarily powerful and educational as well as informative for everyone. So my last question to you gentlemen is, if you had a message and you decide who your message is going to be directed at, young people, people who are currently incarcerated, state leaders and legislators, or the general public, you decide who you want to give the message to. What would you say in your last remark? What would that message be if you had to share it with someone? And I would start with Mr. Saldana, then I would go to Mr. Klink, and then Mr. McGraw.
I think the one message that I would at least try to give it to people who are disconnected from mass incarceration is that people in prison, a lot of things bad happen in prison, no question about it. I can attest to that. I will not lie about that. A lot of things bad happen in prison. But the one thing that happens more than anything else is people transform their lives. They completely change their thinking. And they do it with no reward in sight. I never knew that I was going to get out. There were times when people were dying all around me, but I kept on going on the path that I was on. Because there's one thing that I knew that I can control. If nothing else, I can't take back the harm that I did. Can't take that back. But I could definitely, no matter when it happens, no matter where it happens, whenever I take my last breath, I could be an honorable man. And this is something that people in prison stay focused on, dying an honorable person. And that's the only reward. And you have people in prison. I was taught by the same people. I didn't just, get these life affirming values out of thin air. They were actually given to me.
Wow, thank you. Very powerful message. Thank you for that. Charles?
Yes, the last message I'll leave people with, young, old politicians, whomever, is a message that my dad used to tell me when I was in prison. And he always told me to do what's right and not what's popular. I'm going to say it again, to do what's right and not what's popular. It's hard. It's easy to get on a bandwagon, and as the saying goes, get along to play along, or play along to get along, right? It's easy to do that, but to actually do the right thing in the midst of everyone else doing something totally different or what's popular just to fit in, again, do what's right and not what's popular, and that holds value even to this day. We see what's going on Capitol Hill. We see what's going on with the politicians, everything, just do what's right and not what's popular. So that's my message.
Thank you. Very important message. Thank you. Daryl?
So for me, and I really appreciate just this time, and Brother Jose mentioned Mr. Ellis. I never had an opportunity to meet Mr. Ellis, but I actually had an opportunity to meet Dr. Pryor, and who said he studied under him, and man, and just the jewels that I got from him was truly a blessing. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and look forward to connecting with you again in some shape or form. Your wisdom is just incredible. But I would say for me, that time is one of the most precious commodities that we have. And we all need to understand and respect that. You know, whenever I go someplace, having been a person who's lost their freedom, I understand how important time is. So when Sanea asked me to come here, I was like, yeah, it was a no-brainer because it was an opportunity to educate and spend, but it also was an opportunity to give a gift, my time, to you as you gave me your time, because I could be anywhere in the world, being a free man, being free in this country. I could do whatever I want. I could be with my kids. I could do whatever I want because my time belongs to me again. But who I share it with these days is very important. How I share it, because I appreciate it, because I know once it's gone, it's gone. So I always remind people, no matter whether you've been locked up or not, take it from a person who has lost their freedom, the value of time and who you spend it with, and never let people waste it. You know, people say time is money. I don't like, you could be offended if someone wastes your time, you know? So I felt like even this time that we spent together was very productive for me and hopefully for someone else. So I just value time. And, you know, I tell brothers inside to value the time. You got 15 years, 5 years, I want you to learn Spanish. The next 5 years, I want you to learn French. The next 5 years, I want you to learn this. I want you, by the time you come out, you'll multi-language. You'll have multi-language. You know how many people don't know how to speak 3 languages, but understand how to utilize this time. So, and just appreciate it, because it's a gift. And once it's gone, it's gone.
Wow. Again, thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time, for your wisdom and pearls. And this has been one of the most extraordinary episodes we've done, and it's only because of you guys. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Thanks.
Yeah. And just remember to put your contact information in the chat so we can have it available, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of folks, including some of the students that's going to listen to this later on, in case they want to get in touch with you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Yes.
Brothers, I'll be in touch, man.
Okay.
We can't let it in here, man. We got to do it.
Absolutely. And
right.
I invite you guys to come back anytime.
Oh, anytime.
Okay,
Thank you
yes.
so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank
All right.
you so much.
Okay. Bye. Peace.
Thank
Peace and
you.
blessings.
Peace.
You
Peace.
too. Take care.